Hi fam, it's Dylan's mum Deborah. This is Dylan Friends.
Oh my God, we've killed Michael Jordan's dad.
I won the first Brownlow. The problem with that was I wanted it again.
Hey Jared, delete the tweet.
No, we're not here to break news.
This is an exclusive.
It's so silly looking back on for me because I remember just feeling like I'm not needed.
I couldn't, in my wildest of dreams, imagine that we would win the flag at the end of the year.
Damo's a lot funnier than people give him credit for.
Hugely funny.
But Andrew, a little message came across his phone and it was, give Job his Brownlow back.
Bevo, how you going, mate?
I'm good, Dill. Thank you.
Absolute honour. Oh, mate, I'm well. Yeah, very well. Absolute honour to have you in today. This is. It's funny. Every time I've had a coach on, you almost get that straight away. That little bit of nervousness when you walk into a one-on-one with a coach. Because for me, they never quite went the way I was hoping.
It's all right, mate. You're still in the team, and I can't delist you, so don't be nervous.
That's the first time I've ever heard that. That's fantastic, mate. How are you? Busy time of year. We're heading into obviously a big season. What's happening?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, you get to the end of a pre-season and it's a project within a project and you feel a little bit relieved that you got a fair bit of work under your belt. We've had a few injuries in recent times and I just look at that as opportunity for some other guys to come in and play the way we want to play, you know. So you can look at it two ways, but it's encouraging the amount of work the players have put in and we're looking forward to the start of it all.
Can you rate pre-seasons? Like I know everyone feels good in pre-seasons, like you feel fit, but I suppose it comes when the games are happening. Was there something ideally that you went into this one working on? Was there a specific theme or did you do any trips that were sort of the catalyst for something heading into the year?
Yeah, it's a probing great question actually because it depends on how you bounce out of the previous year and we had a terrible elimination final, but if we look at the precursors to that, we finished the year with the best defensive profile in the competition, the second best offensive. So scoring the second most in the comp. So our players had a resolve that what we were doing worked, regardless of a really disappointing elimination final. So that's a good starting point. And then I think like most clubs, you endeavour to continue to scale up with how much training you do depending on what your players can endure. But the bottom line is you can never get carried away with it because the main variable that you're confronted with is the opposition and you're just never sure the quality and the performance based side of it that you're going to get from who you're playing against. You know, so that's an aspect that you sit on what you've done. You think, okay, we're pretty comfortable with it, but only in retrospect, once you get into the season, can you look back and say, yeah, I think we prepared pretty well.
It's incredible the last few years as well, and I'm not sure if maybe publicly it's been the last few years or for you it's been longer than that, but it's mind-blowing now, I think, with the levelness of the competition, and I feel that literally any team can actually win the comp. It's just about right time, right place, but also a bit of momentum and capitalising on that and starting well or finding form at certain points in the season. Like, you know, last year was quite an up and down year, and I suppose like in team sport sometimes you can be either winning it or you're absolutely nowhere near it. But it jumped for you guys last year. Like it was really at certain points. Do you feel that that's the case in the comp at the moment?
Yeah, it is. It depends what you prioritise. I mean, the skill and game sense aspect of the game will never go away. You know, so you've got to be quite adept at kicks, handballs, ball handling, marks, etc., and the courage and the endeavour within your team is obviously really critical. So we went through the early parts of last year and won, I think, 3 out of the first 8. Still a confidence in what we were doing, but to push the envelope in how we could test the competition, we started to strip back time on the ground of players who didn't necessarily cover it as well as others, and we started to get a different blend and probably the athletic profile of our team we maximised, and so when you say anyone can win it to a degree, you know, it's still 18-year-olds coming in. It's still going to take them some time. It doesn't mean that they can't play AFL footy in their first year, but you're still looking for that core group of experienced players to lay the foundation.
We were chatting just before off air about Richard Harris, who is the cave diver who went over to Thailand, saved the 14 young boys in the cave, and we're sort of talking about how hard it is sometimes when there is high pressure moments throughout seasons or games or all those parts where you can actually come back and remain calm when risk is a variable. How do you deal with that yourself? And has it been like a journey in learning to deal with that or thrive in those situations? Like, obviously, not just talking about yourself and the Bulldogs, but being a coach in the AFL. How do I say this politely? Like, I don't think I could do it. Like, it seems like one of the most stressful under stress jobs really in Australia, because we love our sport and we want results, especially for teams and the game itself. How have you learned to deal with those high pressure moments?
Yeah, well, I mentioned to you that out of all your podcasts, that the one that you facilitated with Richard Harris is by far and away my favourite, just because he's such an inspirational guy. And I think it does get back to his preparedness to take on that responsibility, which was people's lives. That's extreme. When you think about what I do and what senior coaches do, lives aren't really at stake, so it pales into insignificance. So a really inspirational person, and I think we can all draw on that. So I'd actually suggest that anyone who's listening to this who hasn't listened to that podcast of yours, go and tap into it and search it, and because you won't be disappointed. And so I think with what we do, and this is why it's really difficult, I think, for our brand new senior coaches, that you build up layers of resilience every year. You know what real apathy is within your own fibre, what to take notice of and what to dismiss and what to be really passionate about. And I've always, I think I mentioned it to you before we got on here as well, that you almost start with a doomsday scenario where if things go wrong, will I be okay? And if you can picture and visualise yourself in that probably diabolical situation where things aren't going well, and you can still say to yourself, "Yeah, I'll be okay," and the future will still be bright. Then I think you can make really concerted, relaxed, and collaborative decisions. Tapping into other people. So. I agree that I think what we do now is it's scrutinised more and more. It's almost like a sport within a sport to work out whether or not a senior coach is going to last a significant period of time. I don't go on to the days where there's long contracts at AFL level, I think, unless you've got a team that's really at the depths and it might take some time. So, and I from my point of view, it's got to be right for everyone. Yeah, it's 10 years now for me. We've only got 4 players left who started with me. And the core staff who are still around, they're not coaches. Like our whole coaching roster has just evolved and changed over time. And all the guys who've come and gone have really contributed and influenced our club. And that's part of the challenge, to be a good manager and bring people together and create a really powerful, harmonised environment, which I love as a challenge. And so I've still got a real passion for it, got energy for it, but I understand that the club needs to be strong too around senior coaches and stable, and that's not easy when you've got probably the media and your supporter base agitated at times. And I think up until now our club's been relatively strong and really supportive. But I live in the real world and that'll run out at some point, or it may not. Stepping off without getting sacked is a rarity.
It's interesting comments, and it's probably nothing that I wasn't thinking that you might say, because I think what's absolutely correct. And we had a podcast actually last year with Isaac Smith. He made this amazing point, and I loved it so much. And it might be hard for you to comment on this, obviously being a senior coach at a club at the moment. But he was speaking about the time when he left Hawthorn to choose another club to go to. And he didn't really look at anything but the stability of what a football club is and around, not just, the senior coach on the list. It was like who's on the board, what's the turnover been like, and all these things. And I think that holistically today, just thinking about decisions, like I'd love people to know that as well, whether you're a junior coach listening to this trying to get some insight, or you're coaching a netball team out in bloody Moorabbin. It's not just the one coach. It's having like an incredible support network around the coach as well that gives them the faith to then actually keep moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the end point and all that matters really is that the players have got belief and a significant level of confidence in strategy, in the way that it's managed, in the direction you're heading, and that support group that you're alluding to are critical in that, because it's a people, the people in it and the energy that goes into a football club. It doesn't matter whether it's in a metropolitan or a regional sense or an AFL sense. It's all compatible. But I think the thing about what happens at AFL clubs is you got high end achievers and people with a great work ethic, and they're unique people. I don't want to speak ill of my public service days. I was, different agencies for 17 years, but I quite often say that in leaving any agency, if I could take my pick of 50 people that I worked with, how many would I take with me? And, unfortunately, I would say very few. But from every AFL club I've ever played at or worked at, if I had the choice of taking the pick of 50 with me, there wouldn't be many I'd leave behind, because they're just, just amazing people. And they care about others. They don't get a job unless they do. And that's where when new players come in and you're assessing their character, if they're not built that way, if they're not really team-oriented, if they're so caught up in their own world, we've got to continue to massage that to make sure that they care about the bigger picture and not just their own backyard. But, the challenge is with all of that, never go away.
I could talk to you for hours, Bevo, but I've realised that I'm just not following track at all, so I'm going to get into it. But before I do, we're in already.
Right, okay.
No, we're well and truly in, but I just haven't hit anything I actually want to. I want to just keep going. But before we do, to be frank, now a good friend of ours, Carly Miranda, she's actually here. I love these cards, and I heard that you use these with a few of your players.
Yeah.
So I thought that maybe today we could have a little let's get deep conversation started. Now there is a romantic version of this too.
It's more than romantic. It gives you an insight into the way Carly thinks. She wrote all the questions.
I thought I wouldn't do that one with you today, but maybe if we get another one, we can get into that one. Yeah. First question, we're in the deep end here. What has been the most difficult decision you've had to make in your life to date?
I'd have to go recent. We lost Dad last year, and my sister and I were medical powers of attorney and financial powers of attorney, and Dad had Parkinson's for 10 years, and his last few years were a real struggle. And as part of his daily routine, he had to take some tablets for his Parkinson's. But right at the end of his journey there, he couldn't swallow anymore. And unfortunately, the medication can't be delivered any other way but orally. There's no drip or there's no injection. And I got a phone call to tell me that he couldn't swallow the tablets, and could they ramp up the palliative care aspect of his is finishing up really, because ultimately what that means is he goes on heavier painkillers, and ultimately, his heart was going to stop. So, as his medical power of attorney, I had to say, well, I don't think we've got any other choice. And as much as it seemed a pretty easy decision, because there really was no other way, it was still really difficult knowing what was on the other end of it. And, fortunately, in a sense, because he'd suffered enough, he only lasted a day after that. And for all his suffering, that was a good thing. So that'd be it.
No, I appreciate you talking about it. I know it's something that a lot of people have to face as well, which is a really hard decision to make. Yeah. What has been the proudest moment in your life?
Oh, it's definitely around our children. Everything that they do, really. My wife and I, Dana and I, are really fortunate. Kai and Noah, 26 and 24 respectively. They're great kids. And anything that they've done over the years that have filled you with any sense of pride is always trumps anything else.
And last one, this will take us into it. Tell me your life story in 3 minutes.
Ooh. Okay, really? 3 minutes? Okay. brought up on the streets of East Bentley. Loud clothes, one of the local metropolitan grommets, hung around on Fluoro corner of Mackie Road and Centre Road. Magnificent group of primary school mates who I'm still really close to. Unbelievable, inspirational, loving mother who was so giving and still is. She's still with us today. A lot of me and my essence comes from my mum. Primary school at St Peter's, secondary school, Salesian College, St James, and up at St Bede's Mentone. I ended up coaching. Public servant after being a gardener, a receivership liquidation auction hand, and public servant for 17 years. Tax office put me through university, undergrad in taxation, believe it or not. Graduated with honours because I was paranoid about failing. Wanted to play until my legs fell off, but had some injuries, played for Frankston after St Kilda, finished up at tender age of 31, 3 years sulking, got back into football by going down to St Bede's and taking up a coaching role. And then really lucky, first 10 years of my coaching life, 8 grand finals, 7 premierships, and felt like it was easy, So I'm on a drought. And along the way, met Dana when I was 15, been together ever since. As I said, married when we were about 24, 25 we were. And 2 boys, 26, 24. Currently live in Parkdale. Swim a lot, surf a little bit, play guitar here and there, coach, and love my family, really close to big circles and networks of friends, and cherish the good times. Is that 3 minutes?
That was very good. Yeah, very good. People might have thought you were prepared for that, but that was elite. Let's unpack it now because there's a lot there. I don't think a lot of people would realise that you were a public servant. So when you say public servant, you worked in the tax department?
I did for 7 years.
Wow.
I ended up at our financial intelligence agency, an agency called Austrac.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most challenging period of my life was towards the end of my degree. When I was 34, 35, I was studying 2 subjects. We had the 2 boys. I was working full-time and I was coaching St Bede's. So people say to me, how do you cope with the demands of the game in your role? I'm like, well, my life was on steroids when I was in my early 30s and I got away with very little sleep. So I think, people say these days, sleep is critical, and it is, but I don't need more than 5.5, 6 hours a night. So that helps. It means you've got time for a lot of things. And so, the Austrac days were important for me, and definitely the ATO days as far as studying at tertiary level. And that kicked me into having an appetite and probably a passion for literature after that, because I was sick of the law. And I became probably a voracious reader in my late 30s because I needed to fill a void.
It's interesting, like the perception people might have of you of like surfing, skating, and then you work in the tax office. It's just
it's pretty there's some extremes, is it? There's some extremes
there. You sort of I feel like I can say this because I maybe had a similar, somewhat, you obviously a lot better than me, but similar career in the sense that you breezed over your football a little bit. Like, is it something you just don't like talking about, or is it something that you just want to not be defined as a player as well, or something that doesn't sit comfortable with you? Did you get the most out of yourself is probably what I'm trying to ask. Yeah.
I think we can all be, I'm uncomfortable giving my life journey in 3 minutes, let alone, I feel like, the self-adoration or talking about your AFL days. I was a survivor. I had some days in the sun where I played some influential games at the 3 clubs I played for. I was 6 years at Melbourne, 2 under-19s, Footscray for 3 years, and then the Saints for 4. So I felt like, I worked hard. I ran myself into the ground, but I worked full time the whole time as well. They weren't full time footy days, and we didn't get paid a lot back then. I remember at the start of my second year with the Dogs, Terry Wheeler brought everyone in and he made a point of thanking me in front of the players that I'd taken a pay cut for the next year. And I was standing there thinking, hang on, surely I'm not the most important player who's taken a pay cut. When you're already on about $7,500 and it's gone down to $5,000, hopefully someone else can step forward and they've taken a bigger pay cut than me, you know. And I don't know whether Wheels is just making an example and maybe trying to influence everyone else to throw some money in the hat. I'm not sure, but it was amusing to me because I was never paid much as a player. My foundations were from my daily job. That's financially. But no, I'm quite proud of how I hung in there, and there were times when I was finished. You know, the writing was on the wall, and you had to reinvent yourself, and you were asked to do things or change your game, which maybe the coach didn't think you could at the time, but you found a way, and so I'm quietly content that I got a lot out of myself. Probably not everything, but to last for 11 years. And probably the difficult thing back then is we didn't have rotations. When you're playing mostly forward pocket, it's a pretty easy change when things aren't going well. Let's rip the forward pocket off and put someone else on. So I had games where I played very little game time. In those 118 AFL games, there were games when I played less than a quarter, less than a half. That doesn't really happen these days unless you get injured. So they were unique times, but I didn't touch on it because I didn't achieve a hell of a lot, played in some finals. But the most probably critical thing for me were the relationships that I formed and the experiences I think that shape you in life from doing the hard yards. There's so many we haven't got all day as you mentioned, but the stories about pre-seasons, the things you're asked to do, the running up Mount Buller, the 100-hundreds, all these things that tested your mettle, that you went into thinking, will I be able to survive this? And you did. You can only come out the other side a better person after something like that. What was your hardest one pre-season? I think Johnny Northey, Chris Jones, who was working at Carlton back in the day, his understudy was a guy named Steve Lawson. Steve came to us and they used to do this game set running, which was a 40-metre sprint, a 70-metre stride, a 40-metre sprint, and then about a 40-metre jog as slow as you could. And then you just did it again. Sprint, stride, sprint, slow. You build up, you did it for an hour. That was the test. So that was one. Chris Jones actually came to our club and was working with Steve Lawson at one point, so we knew we were in for some times then. But we used to do the 100-hundreds. People talk about the 100-hundreds and they say, oh, they did, so-and-so did the 100-hundreds. Well, did you really do it? Because when we did it, it was 15 seconds with the wind. You had to run the 100 in and 16 into it. So you got 30 seconds rest if you run it with the wind, and you got 29 seconds rest if you ran it against the wind. So you did it off 45 seconds, and you got 2 minutes break in between each 25. And the first year I did it, is at Melbourne. The senior group had done it the year before, and so 28 of us started, and they were the guys who'd come up from under-19s who had been invited to the senior pre-season. So 28 started, only 8 finished. Guys were just dropping out along the way. And there's some of the things that you're proud of. Like you made that, and that was like you do 15 and you'd have 85 to go and you think, I'm cooked already. And you just tried to get to 25 to get you 2 minutes. And then the next year they said, okay, well, we're going to do it again, everyone as a group. This is before Christmas. And so I was an asthmatic at the time, and I grew out of asthma when I was 25. So when you think, and what's the best thing that has ever happened to you? It is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I grew out of it. I used to get it every day, every night when I trained. But at 25, I stopped getting asthma. So I was very lucky. But because I had asthma, they had me training with the rehab group, which was 3 times a week. I was living in East Bentley, driving the Footscray pool, 6 a.m., with a guy named Buddy Portier, a former water poloist. And so the test for the rehab group was 4K before Christmas. First K breathing every 3 strokes, second K breathing every 5, then 3, then 5. So 4Ks, and that was their 100 hundreds. So I did that and the 100 hundreds before Christmas. And when you think about the build up to a season and what we used to do back then, like we were ready to play on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And we were working full time. And
Unbelievable.
So I'd do that in the morning, go to work. And I was a gardener then, so I was on my legs or on my feet all day. And Dennis Knight was a great mate of mine. We grew up and played for the same junior club. Nighty was playing under 19s and then reserves footy. And I was working with Nighty, and then we'd go to train, and then do it all again. And
it's unbelievable.
So you had about 6 or 7 significant sessions, and those tests were happening before Christmas.
Do you is it funny now you look back and taking care of your own team and you watch some of the guys sometimes and they're like, oh, I'm a bit tired from the session before. If only you knew what we used to do. I know the sports science come a long way.
Yeah.
Can you tell us one of the hardest sessions you've put forward as a coach for your team? Like when have you been like, geez, we tested them out today?
Yeah, to be honest, there probably isn't a session where you push the envelope like that as a coach anymore. And I think our high performance guys they're not conservative, but in their partnership with our medical team, you don't push the boundaries as far as we used to back then. I often wonder whether or not your own players could get through those things. I remember one of the John Northey, who I love as a person, but as a coach, very inspirational guy. Got a lot out of his teams at the Demons and beyond. He was quite close friends with Steve Monaghetti, which is dangerous. And our first training camp at senior level coming out of under-19s, we went and stayed in Mansfield at the Arlberg, and the main test was to run up Mount Buller. It was a race. So it was a 15.5K race up Mount Buller. And I remember back then, Jimmy Steins, just an outstanding person, but an outstanding athlete. We just thought Jim will win this. And we had a guy named Peter Rennie, who was a DLSL boy. We thought it'd be out of those two guys. And they did. They ran, I think, second and third. But Dougie Coop, who was just a tractor, and a great guy, Doug, and just a hard worker, got a lot out of himself. Dougie just ticked him over and churned, and he won the race. And it was a huge surprise, but it was a testament to his tenacity, to do that, because it was such a difficult thing to do. A real challenge for everyone. The guys who were in the rehab group, they rode their bikes from Merrijig, and they rode up Mount Buller, and all up was about a 48K ride. And the only one to get up there without stopping was the late Sean White, who's no longer with us. So, that was a great experience. It really, really was. But you often think, okay, if we put our current playing group through that, how would they go? Because I do run adventure runs for them on our camps, and I go into the hinterland or through the national parks and map out what I think will be challenging for them. But by and large, we do it in teams, so it's not an individual race, and it's that concept of you're only as strong as your weakest link, and they have to churn through some cryptic clues and work together to get to the end point and solve the puzzles. And but as far as the individual goes, there's always an unknown about what their capacity would be.
Does anyone stand out throughout your career coaching in the modern day play that you think would be up there with some of the most mentally tough guys you've seen?
Yeah, I think Marcus. I mean, that's easy to state, because I think it's a commonality with all the movers and shakers. The marquee players in the competition who, by and large, when you look through each season that they play, you can probably, attribute a handful of wins to their influence in the game, just as that player just pushing the envelope. And Marcus is that player and that person. And it's interesting, when he's away from the club, it's a bit of a mystery as to how much he does and what he does in preparation. But he's he's very driven, and his level of care and the responsibility, getting back to that word, that he wants to take on to set the example is extreme. So I think he stands out.
Can we go back to St. Bede's days? So working as a public servant, finished up your footy career. You said you were sort of sitting out for a few years on the sidelines. What was the catalyst to get back involved in footy and coaching?
A guy named Russell Barnes, who's an amateur legend. Barnes, he's a Norman player, played in all their flags in the 80s, early 90s. And Barnesy's wife is Judy Barnes, is a great friend of my sister's. And even when I was still playing at VFL, AFL level, Russell would say to me, "Hey, Luke, what will it take when your career's over to get you down to help me out?" It's like, "I'm still going, mate. Just ease off. Don't finish me off too quick." But I finally, after 3 years, thinking after the Frankston days, I had a foot injury that was ongoing, and I couldn't run like I wanted to. I couldn't prepare, and I wanted to keep playing. So I thought I'll come out of the game. And I felt like I was sulking a little bit, because I just loved the game so much. And as I said, I wanted to play until my legs fell off. And but I finally, St Paul's Bentley, the local club, contacted me. They wanted me to coach them, and I went down to chat to them, and it was a little bit grey as to whether it was going to happen. So I just rang Russell and said, "Mate, I'm coming down. I'll take the boys for a pre-season." So I did. The team was in B section. I took them for a pre-season. They'd lost some players. Got to about round 7, and they hadn't won a game, and I felt helpless. So I started playing again, and we won 5 of our last 10 games, I think, but we got relegated. And then so it was through Russell's coaxing. Barney was just on to me every year that I went down, and I went to St Bede's. And I was there a year 11 and 12. I had some friends or people I knew down there, and I wanted to feel like I belonged to a club. Didn't matter what level. And so I took up the senior coaching job the next year, and we got going. Yeah.
So what transpired from there? Like, obviously coaching them, it didn't sound like it was a massive part of like where you wanted to head with footy, to then ending up now as a premiership coach. A lot sort of changed in that period.
Yeah, over my playing days, there were things that shaped me, the positions I played, who I played against, my beliefs in how, systematically, you would direct individuals, lines, a team to play the game. The positioning aspect of the defenders, the movement and deals, and the synchronicity of the mids, and the urgency and the false starting of the forwards, and So I had pretty firm ideas. I just didn't have a great passion. I didn't really, to be honest. I hadn't done a lot of public speaking, but during my public service days, I'd gone through different courses, presentation skills and project management and risk management and change management. And so I felt really equipped to take on, the frameworks of being someone in charge. And we, in my first year, I played C-section when the year after we got relegated, and I coached. And I was quite an aggressive defensive coach, with a really pressing sort of attitude. And we only lost one game that year, and it was the second semi. And that is in the lead up to the preliminary final against Parkdale after Ajax beat us in the second semi. It was probably the most nervous that I've ever felt in my life. I just felt this intense sense of responsibility again. I was a senior coach. I was playing. I was going to move myself to the back pocket and omit one of the players, and I was going to move myself from the forward line. Because if we lose that preliminary final, we've won all 18 games, lost the second semi, lost the prelim, we finished third, we get nothing. And so that was, talking about catastrophizing. I had this this vision of what that looked like. So everything in preparation, was obviously geared to make sure that didn't happen. We won that preliminary final quite emphatically, and then, on the grand final, really, it's still the most incredible game that I've ever been involved in. We're 21 goals 12 to 21 goals 11. We won by a point against Ajax, and I still remember, and as I said, I was playing, I looked at the scoreboard and I thought, I hope they've got that score right. because it just seemed like that much went on that may not be right. Because we were 47 points down in the second quarter. And I remember I ran off the ground and Tim Lamb, who's Melbourne's list manager, Tim was my right-hand man. So he was my bench coach while I was playing. And he was upstairs at Sandringham where the grand final was played. And I ran in and we were in all sorts. And we made about 4 changes, positional changes with some players, and they all worked. Like we kicked 4 goals at the end of the second quarter and just gave us a sniff. And history will tell you. We actually got in front, and then Ajax kicked out to another 17-point lead, and then we pegged it back again. Normally you're done, So it was just an incredible game. Yeah, it was probably the most satisfying day. Obviously the 16 grand final was quite incredible, but that day our 19s won, our seconds won, which Lammy coached as well, so he had a big day, and our seniors won on that day. So fair to say it was a pretty intense celebration back at Brindisi Street.
I can imagine. Where did the conversation start heading to then head back into AFL land? Like what was the movement path to get you back there? Yeah,
I'd made up my mind early in the 2008 year, which was the A section year at St Bede's, that I was going to finish up and throw my hat in the ring for something in the pathway at AFL level. And fortunately we won the flag that year, but in succession I'd organised Owen Lawler, who was our under-19s coach. Like our senior team won CB and A, and we had 5 under-19 kids in every one of those sides. Players who'd gone to the school, so the alumni coming through, and Owen was coaching the under-19, so I'm pinching his best 5 players every week. And he was always really supportive, promoted those young fellas all the time. And that his coaching, they won Div 3, Div 2 and Premier League under-19s as the seniors won as well. So it's just incredible 3 years for the football club. But Owen took over for me. I actually got the Sandy Dragons job. I was supposed to coach Sandy Dragons, and the first 2.5 weeks I was planning pre-season, and then Collingwood contacted me, and I went in and sat down with Mick Malthouse, and they offered me the development manager role, and so I moved on. And it's quite topical really, because we just lost Dale Tapping, and so I move on, but Taps takes up that Sandy Dragons job, and I said to Dale, hey, my great mate Tim, who's been a great support for me, he was going to be one of my assistant coaches. He's still willing to do it if you're looking for coaches. So Dale took Lammy on as one of his assistants, and that helped Lammy in his pathway to now be the list manager at the Demons. So that's the connection there with Dale. And then 9 and 10 at the Pies, and the Pies won 10, and then 11 I went back into the public service for a year, and I was on the board with the Victorian Amateurs, and so I got involved in all their rep teams, and I went to Ireland with them for 2 weeks, which is a great experience, and so all the rep teams were really successful. But I had to make a decision because I was talking to Clarko during that 11 year, and I resigned from the public service and went and worked at Hawthorn, and 3 grand finals, lost 12, won 13 and 14. Then went to the Dogs. I went to the Saints for about 3 days, and then I got the job with the Dogs. And fortunately, 15 into 16, and so at that time, I'd had an amazing 10 or 11 years in coaching, and then it's just a reminder of how tough it can be, and your resources and the variables involved in the game sometimes define you, and but you start from the premise of a really firm resolve and belief in your people, and you just can't waver from that.
So just to go back one step, after Hawthorn and Collingwood, were you going to Saints as a senior assistant, and then got the role at the Dogs?
Yeah, at the time there were no really senior positions available in the game, and I was appointed in a director of coaching role at the Saints under Alan Richardson, and so I was to go over there and oversee more the phase coaching, the offense, the defense, and stoppages, and help the coaching panel on their journey, but it didn't last long. And
did you interview for the Bulldogs job?
A day before we were heading to San Francisco, we were going to drive down the Pacific Highway, San Diego and Vegas, and head back to Anaheim. So the boys take them to Disneyland. We were pretty lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. So I got a phone call in San Diego, Simon Garlick, who was the CEO at the time, and he just said, look, we want you to be really serious about this. We think you're one of the better candidates. And then when we toured and came back to Anaheim, I was online in the foyer at the hotel doing emotional intelligence tests, and I was firmly sort of caught up in the whole selection process then. So after that, I came back. We came back a few days early, and I interviewed. And Fiona McGecky, who's on our board now, who's a director at Egon Zender, an executive search company, she was my final challenge. I spent a few hours with her. She was really trying to find out about the essence of me and who I was and what I stood for. And ultimately I was appointed and fortunate to be appointed.
That time at the Dogs as well was a pretty hectic time. Like you remember, but the people listening, like 2015 you're appointed. So that was a season where Ryan Griffin went to Giants. So he lost the captain, they'd lost the coach and the CEO. So did Garlick come in or did he finish up?
No, Simon was still there.
There.
Yeah, it was probably more the coach, and some players had moved, but Ryan was probably the topical one who went and played for GWS for a period of time, and so I think people, if you talk to people at the time who were at the football club, there was definitely some instability, and it was a great challenge. I mean, when I was appointed, the coaching roster had all been recontracted for 2 years. I didn't bring anyone with me, so collectively we picked up the pieces. I think we had about 10 new players come in, and I said to our younger guys the other day, that 15 year, we had Caleb Daniel, Toby McLean, Bailey Dale, Lucas Webb, Zane Cordy. We had 5 kids play about 10 or 12 games in their first year of senior footy, and we made an elimination final. We were in a close one with the Crows who beat us, but it laid some foundations for the next year. And I think, Bob Murphy took over the captaincy, and he played some really influential and sensational footy over his career. But I don't think he'd played a better season. We made sure he played a little bit higher as a defender, and he took on that role with a plume. And he was the All-Australian captain that year. He came second in our best and fairest in a pretty close run race. But he was just outstanding and really led the way on and off the field. And some of those senior boys, I actually grabbed 5 of them and I said to them, I don't know how long your careers will go for, but you are the the leadership foundation of this whole club at the moment. And it was guys like Brett Goods was one of those. Brett hadn't played a lot of senior footy, great character. First Nations man. I love Brett. We only had him for a couple of years when my start, and it was obviously Bob, Matt Boyd, Dale Morris, Will Minson was part of that, and Liam Picken. And outside of those guys, it wasn't a great deal of experience, and so the players did a phenomenal job, and then obviously it culminated in the 16 success.
Do you remember the theme going into the year, or is there a certain theme or time throughout the year that something clicked that potentially you could, have a premiership?
Yeah, I'm okay to talk about those things on reflection. Sometimes, when you don't achieve anything, it's not worth it, really. But Graham Lowe, who was our football manager, who was such a fine contributor, and Graham finished up after 16, but he was really important, pivotal into our progress over those 2 years. He brought this book in, and he said, tell me what you think of this. And it was this blue-purple book, and it had all these dogs in it. And if you read, there's a bit like what's the name of that book with the kid and the monsters and the Let the Wild Rumper Start? Anyway, I'll get to it. But anyway, on each page is really only one line, and essentially the the message in the book is step outside of your comfort zone, and the final line is run toward the fire. And so this book was owned by Saatchi & Saatchi, one of the sort of worldwide advertising entities, and they had a presence in South Melbourne, sort of open office area, and they were okay with us printing our own with a little Bulldogs logo on it. So we handed these books out to everyone, and it wasn't really until the final series that really came to life, and that that risk taking, and I think it's a commonality in all of us as coaches in our messaging, but the imagery and the metaphoric language, it was really powerful. And yeah, grand final day was interesting because working in the city for such a long period of time, I knew different things about the history of our CBD and what had happened, and we'd come off the grand final parade on the Friday, and because we were playing Sydney, if you looked at the streets, it looked like everyone barracked for the Bulldogs because red, white and blue, all you needed to do was just, picture there was nothing competing with it because Sydney are red and white. So the blue just meant that everyone was there for the Bulldogs. And so the hotel on how am I going here? On Russell. Anyway, the Beatles stayed at the hotel back in the day, and they came out of there, and I went in there when I was working for the auctions, and on the doors it had all their names: George, Ringo, John, and Paul. And you could I could have bought one of those doors if I wanted to, but I sort of kicked myself that I didn't. But it kind of felt like, the players or these rock stars in the back of these utes, and all these people were cheering for them. So we made a bit of a thing about that. That's where the bring your instrument stuff came from, and sort of having a lend of the Beatles time through the CBD, and making sure that the players felt like they had a freedom to perform. That was important on the day. So that and that's generally the way that I approach it. Like the match day angle might be a bit different to the underlying theme and motivational hook that's sort of run for the whole year. But I think those books are really important, and I'm grateful for Graham to source those. And each year after that, and we don't do it anymore, but we'd give one of those books to our new players. And it got a bit tired, so we've stopped doing that. So we look for new things.
Yeah. I love themes, and I know, just from players that have played under you, like how good of a storyteller and how much you love to build that in. As a player, I love themes, and I love something it's not so much about the story, but it's something to then recognise back to and bring into your own story at a time that suits. And was it 2016 the year that Jason Janison tore his hamstring and made it back for the granny, or was that the year before?
No, it was
middle of the year. He tore it off the bone.
Yeah. Geez, it's a good question. It's the guys in the lead up to the final series. JJ wasn't one of those, I don't think, who was coming back off a long hiatus. The timeline, because JJ's done so many hamstrings over his career.
There's been a few.
Yeah.
The reason I remember it, though, is like in the very rarely game that I did play, I played a game against you guys when, I can think now back to you explaining what the theme was. I was on first-hand experience the theme of just like taking the game on, and used to have like a JJ up at the stoppage, and he'd just run off whenever he could. Yeah. And my role was to try and stop him. Anyway, I didn't. But I remember when he tore his hammy, I was chasing him, and I tore my calf at the same time. But I think to the point of this whole story, there's not about my calves, is the fact that when you played against the Dogs in that period, like you were just like, fuck, what are they going to do? Like they just had so much confidence heading into that season that if you can, it's very hard. It's very easy to say take risks and play on, but to actually do it as well and be comfortable is another thing.
That sniper with 2 bullets in his gun in the stands got you both.
It got us both.
Yeah. And that's the art of coaching in a sense, and the willingness of your players to take on some adventure as well, and a tolerance to mistakes, to push the outer limits and the boundaries of that balance of offensive defence. There's got to be a licence in what they do. I won't say that any of our players have never taken liberties with that offensive side of the game, and JJ probably
I'm sure some don't have the license though. Is that fair to say? It's a metaphoric license. Some have, some don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you just describing what your role was that day, straight away, you're winning if you stop JJ.
Yeah.
And as a forward, which you were playing that day, you're not normally winning if you're not getting a kick.
No.
Or you can only put on so many blocks for a key forward for you to be able to convince your coaching staff that that's enough for you to keep getting a game. You've got to do a little bit more than that. But the negative forward role means that straight away you've probably got the opposition glass half empty to a degree, because you still need that discipline in your team and in your roles. And if Dylan Buckley pulls this off, we're a chance to win because Jason Johannisson's such an influential player. And that's the way I've always thought about the defensive principles, is if you can get opposition forwards out of position through what you're doing, it's very difficult unless they've just got enormous engines for them to recover offensively. For you to come off chasing or defensive compression to be able to lengthen and run post, and the best small and tall forwards in the game can get up and back, but there's still a huge challenge for them to be able to do that. But Jay was just a critical figure in the progressions, and obviously he won a Norm Smith medal in that grand final, and his influence, especially in the first half of that game. Sydney had some small forwards, Papley and some others who had been really good players, but they were off kilter because they were chasing him and Matthew Boyd and Shane Biggs, and they couldn't get their offensive game intact.
Is there a moment that stands out to you that you reflect on often in that final series, not necessarily the grand final? Like, we've probably seen a lot of those moments with, Boyd, Picken, the Shane Biggs never forget. Obviously, like him doing all the smothers, and it ended up turning into Boyd's goal, I think it was. Into Picken's goal.
Yep.
Is there a moment throughout that final series that you reflect on often that maybe a lot of us wouldn't have seen, but behind closed doors was a pivotal role in the team's success?
Yeah, there were many things. I mean, I think, don't we, post-success, we attribute it to individuals. We say, well, if he didn't play, you wouldn't have won it, or if he didn't do this, and that's true. But, you're a sum of your parts, and there are so many things that you could really, put the microscope on that happened during that period. I think one of the things, the preliminary final against the Giants was still, I think, one of the most incredible games that's ever really been played at any level. And both teams early in the piece were hit by injury, with Callum Ward going down with the Giants, who's a special player. And we lost Jordan Roughhead. He got a poke in the eye and he couldn't play anymore. Like, it was actually an eye injury. And so Tommy Boyd... Tom, even in the grand final, he kicked I think 3 goals. I'm pretty sure 2 of them were in the ruck. I even think the longer one, without me going back and totally processing it, I think he was playing in the ruck. Now, he mightn't have been, but the responsibility he took up as our first ruck in that game against the Giants, was just critical for us to hold sway and maintain some kind of momentum in the game. So I think that was important. But I also, and this is where the 2 big boys are quite pivotal in your critical thinking about those days. There was a time in the last quarter where Jason Johannesson kicks along what appeared to be a goal, and so they go to score review. And if that's a goal, then Sydney need to score, I think, 3 times to get in front of us. We end up going about 14 points up, I think. And so you're waiting with bated breath, because if it isn't a goal, the game is well and truly on the line. And the sense of the human emotions, during that time with all the hard work, if it isn't a goal, when you're weighing up who's thinking positively and who's thinking, shit, we really needed that, and there's a negative aspect of the thought process, it was just a pivotal moment in the game. And so it comes back that it's touched. And and then the whole box is just breathless. You're waiting to see how the players react, and they kick it in and they go long because there's a sense of urgency now. There's not much time left in the game. They go straight up the middle, and Jordan Roughhead intercepts the ball just to take the air out of the game. And it's like, that if that gets through and out the back, then that for me in all the moments in the game was just, that's the one that stood out for me after the 4 games, the intercept mark from Ruffy. And we went back the other way, and the game was stabilised. But yeah, we were pretty worried when that was
I know the exact feeling. It can flip straight away, like 180. Amazing. I know you've been extremely generous with your time. A couple more to finish up, and please don't shorten these. This is more my anyway. When you won the grand final, the next season heading into the 2017 season, obviously didn't probably go to plan of what it did for the next couple of years. Missed finals the next couple of years.
Yep.
On reflection, and then heading into where you're at now as a team and coach, was there anything that you think the team could have done differently post those seasons, or was it just not the right time to be able to back it up?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. That final series, when you think about the Flotsam and Jetsam and the characters in our team that created that success for the club, it wasn't done through a stereotypical playbook, stereotypical makeup and framework of a team. Even in that final series, our 3 main goal kickers were Clay Smith, Tory Dixon and Liam Picken. And at the start of the 2017 year, they weren't available. And people will say, oh, what on earth is Easton Wood doing playing forward? Well, we didn't have any speed in our forward line. And that experiment, that play and Easton changing positions only really lasted about 2 or 3 weeks because Easton really he's a task-oriented man. He's a beautiful and a great man, but he wasn't going to be a forward. But we needed speed. The makeup of our team was different. We had probably our most significant loss against the Giants around about that time, I think. But all of us, if you asked our players how did they handle success, I don't think we handled it too well. I think it was one of those ones where you lie down and you do the the snow fairies or whatever, and you think the world could end because you've never been so satisfied. Well, ultimately, you got to come back to the trough and go again, and we really didn't. There was some stuff going on behind the scenes that will probably never be divulged around how the players are handling the pressures of the game, and so there's no regrets. It's just the way it was. That when you come out of 16 and you're hoping for some sustainability with injury and the human capital and the human spirit, we were always pushing it uphill, unfortunately. And so then you've got to come out of that and evolve and lift again. And the changes through the list since then have been quite significant. But I think the boys, they struggled with a little bit of success, and not all of them. There was a core group who were trying to hold sway, maybe 10 or 12, but we couldn't keep it together, unfortunately.
No, I appreciate your honesty. It's really refreshing. I think that, I think it's a really big lesson for a lot of coaches going forward, but even for you guys in the next phase of your coaching and tenure with the Doggies, of what will happen if you can get it together. I'm sure things can actually be in good stead for the next period of success, which would be huge.
Yeah, it will be. And as I said earlier on, you start with that platform of unwavering belief in your people and your players, and we need improvements all the time from guys who have been playing the game for any period of time, but you're always the awakening of first-year players and what they might contribute, and then some good fortune. I think if we can get our health back together as far as the whole group goes, and that'll be important from a depth point of view. Because, again, I said to the players, in the 16 year, we played, I think, 39 players, which was, I think, the most in the competition. And in the 21 year, where we fell short in the grand final, we played 41 players, and it was the most by about 4. And that squad mentality and playing to, the depth of your resources, you're going to need them all, and they need to stay in the game, regardless of how challenging the the year is. And so that's the message as we step off. We're going to need you all. I mentioned the example of the first yearers and back in 15 and the first yearers this year and the guys who came in last year, they're critical to how we evolve and whether or not we can be the team that can find sustained success at some point through that youth and the replacement of guys who have moved on. It's so important to us.
One thing I've loved about you from afar, and today first time sort of catching up and chatting about it, is your unwavering belief and I suppose love of your players and I suppose the respect and protecting them in a sense of external sources, being it media or whatever it is, but then also, and this is probably a question as well, is like how maybe hard you are on them too. So it's like an unwavering belief in them, but also like extremely hard on them. Because I look at times, even as an on-viewer, I look like at some players like McRae or Daniel in the last few years, and other players that are still at the club to this day that might have been really good players, but if they're not up to standard, you're quite good at making tough calls. Is that something that you've always sort of prided yourself on?
Yeah, ultimately, my mandate is to be the best servant of the football club that I can be, and when you recognise that the makeup and constitution, or the configuration of your team needs to evolve for you to have a chance of success, and there's some hard calls and some challenging conversations that need to be made here and there, and it usually starts with how you need players to add layers to their game or evolve into a new position or whatever it may be. And you hope that it doesn't take too long for you to realise what it can look like. But, yeah, some of the more experienced guys who've dropped out of the team based on some internal pressures and maybe how we want the team profile as far as the athletic profile of it to look. It's always been hard, but I have to do it. I can't shy away from it, and I think our club is really stable. When back in at the end of 2014, when things weren't so perfect, the club was still in a lot of debt, and we've had some amazing philanthropists and people who have shaken tins and great administrators, like Peter Gordon and David Smorgan and now Kylie Watson-Wheeler, who's a beauty. But now we're a really stable club. And having said that, if you think about, say, the Tigers who were amazing for that 5-year period, won 3 flags, and West Coast Eagles who won in 2018, and then you see in recent times that they're down the lower end of the ladder. And you think back to, and I'm sure that they'll reflect, what do you need to do to make sure that doesn't happen? Because there's only a finite amount of resources, and there's all these constraints with draft and acquisition and what you can do to bring new players in. So you've got to make sure that you continue to evolve on the run and replenish and make sure that you give yourself a chance to at least be competitive while you're trying to be the best. And we find ourselves in that position. And when as far as the care for, you separate the person from the player to a degree. So I don't shy away from the challenge of being close or feeling like the players can talk to me about anything. It's not that I'm probably trying to avoid being in their space too much. They don't want to be hanging around with the senior coach too often. But my relationships with our players, by and large, I think on a personal level, has usually been in the right place. And if it hasn't, then I feel like it's a real minority. Publicly,
That protectiveness, I suppose, as well, is something that's really admirable. But I'm really keen to get your gauge on that. Like, you don't do a lot of media stuff. Like, absolutely honoured to have you on the podcast today, and it's been a wealth of knowledge that you've passed on to a lot of the listeners. But is it something that you actively avoid, like a relationship with media, or is it something that done in the right way can be?
Yeah, it's interesting, the perception, because there's only really one thing I've ever knocked back. And at the end of the 15 year, which is my first year, if you can remember on AFL 360 on Fox, they used to have a permanent fixture with the two senior coaches that were on it, and Fox asked me to be one of those after my first year, and the paranoia of what our players would think about me, hearing me talk publicly about our club and our performance every week, I just couldn't bring myself to do that, and I still couldn't. I still wouldn't do that. Not every Monday, every week, but it's really the only thing I've ever said no to, and. I'm not even sure how many. I think because of this perception, I'm not even sure. I think there is a misconception that I'm in heavy demand, but I say no. We still do 2 press conferences a week, one pre and one post game. I do a message to our membership base after the game, and it's not like they don't hear from you. But I think by and large, my relationships with the media and the individuals who are embroiled in it has been pretty good. You can't be best mates with everyone, but I've got a respect for. I always say to our players, if you get some negative press or you get some critical thinking around how you're going or how you're not going, if you feel there's an imbalance and they're being too critical, I'll guarantee you if your performances are where you'd like them to be, they're going to write a positive piece. They'll strike a balance. I don't think everyone's like that, but 98 out of 100 are, and I'm okay with that. And I'm kind of, when I mentioned apathy earlier on, I just feel like and it's great being here today, Dylan. I podcasts and yours obviously is there's a lot of depth, and you've been doing it for a while. But it's only really come about now that it's become a thing. It's become such an attraction across media. So I'm always open to it. And in the end, you're an ambassador for your footy club. I think it's you'll know because of some of the things that have happened that there has maybe been a tension at different times. But I think generally I'm a reasonable space with my relationship with most of the constituents.
You shouldn't have said that. You're about to get hit up for about 400 podcasts after this, I think. It could have been the worst thing of today.
So.
Could have been the worst thing of today. Bevo, I genuinely can't thank you enough for your time today, mate. It's been absolutely enthralling. I'm sure a lot of people are going to really get a lot out of this. Again, tuck your feelings. Incredible organisation with the AFL Coaches Association, which we're partnering up for this coaches series. And I know you're really passionate about this side of the business as well, side of the sport, sorry. But a question to end, which we'll end with every coach that we talk to, is what do you do to proactively manage your own mental health? A big thing that I've learned this year being a young dad is, on the plane they say you got to put your own oxygen mask on before you help other people.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, I think there's a commonality between we always feel when a player is studying or they've got a work placement outside of the game that if things aren't necessarily going so well, that at least they've got some other leverage in their life, something that makes them feel good about themselves, something beyond their professional football days that is part of their journey and that they feel good about, because it helps you process the more challenging periods of your job. And likewise with me, I've got some. I mentioned earlier on, the swimming, the surfing, the reading, the bad guitar playing. They're all escapes for me that I love. And I think physical fitness is just critical to what I do and what we do in the cut and thrust of the game. But it's also thinking about what's beyond. Got a little project at the moment, which maybe there's a follow-up once it gets off the ground, mate.
Definitely.
We'll come in and
love to
launch it. But just having different an eye on the future as much as what I'm doing now. So continue to be balanced in my role at the club.
Love it. Bevo, you're a star. Thank you so much for your time today. Best of luck for the season and really excited to see how it goes.
Thanks, Dill. Privileged to be here, mate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.